In 1938, two men shook hands in a barn in Dearborn, Michigan. No lawyers, no contracts, just a handshake. That simple gesture launched a partnership that would revolutionize farming forever. But it also set in motion a chain of events involving lawsuits, betrayal, corporate warfare, and one of the most unlikely mergers in business history. This is the story of how a stubborn Irish inventor and a legendary Canadian company joined forces to create Massey Ferguson, a name that would become synonymous with agricultural innovation across 6 continents. And trust me, this story has everything: family dynasties, aerial daredevils, patent wars, near bankruptcies, and technology that literally feeds the world. Buckle up, because the origin story of Massey Ferguson is way more insane than you'd ever expect from a tractor company. Our story begins in 1847, in a small town called Newcastle, Ontario, Canada. This is where Daniel Massey, a farmer and entrepreneur, started a modest workshop to manufacture farming implements. Now, Daniel wasn't trying to build an empire. He just wanted to make tools that would make his neighbors' lives easier. At the time, farming was brutal, back-breaking work. Everything was done by hand or with simple tools pulled by horses. Daniel started by making simple things: rakes, harrows, and basic plows. Nothing fancy, but they were well made and reliable. But here's where it gets interesting. Daniel had a son named Hart Massey, and this guy was a visionary. When Hart took over the business in the 1850s, he had bigger dreams. He didn't just want to make tools, he wanted to revolutionize farming. Hart Massey was obsessed with American innovation. He'd heard about new mechanical reapers being developed in the United States, and he became convinced that the future of farming was in mechanization. So he did something bold. He started importing American technology and adapting it for Canadian farmers. By 1870, the Massey Manufacturing Company was becoming a household name in Canadian agriculture. They were producing mowers, reapers, and other advanced equipment that was light years ahead of traditional hand tools. But Hart wasn't satisfied. The late 1800s were a wild time in the farm equipment industry. It was like the tech startup world today, but with iron and steel instead of apps and algorithms. Companies were popping up everywhere, competing fiercely, buying each other out, and constantly innovating. In 1891, the Massey family made a game-changing move. They merged with another Canadian company called A. Harris, Son & Company, creating the Massey Harris Company. This merger created the largest agricultural equipment manufacturer in the British Empire. Think about that for a second, from a small workshop to the biggest player in the game in less than 50 years. But the Massey Harris story wasn't all smooth sailing. The company faced intense competition from American giants like International Harvester. They also had to navigate economic depressions, 2 world wars, and massive technological shifts. During World War I and World War II, Massey Harris actually pivoted to produce military equipment. They made tanks, aircraft components, and other war materials. This kept them afloat financially, but it also meant they fell behind in agricultural innovation while their competitors kept pushing forward. By the 1950s, Massey Harris was struggling. They had a good brand name and loyal customers, but they were losing market share to more innovative competitors. They needed something big to turn things around. And that's where our second character enters the story. Now let's travel across the Atlantic to Ireland, where a young man named Harry Ferguson was about to change agriculture forever. Harry Ferguson was born in 1884 on a farm in County Down, Ireland. And from the very beginning, this guy was different. He hated manual farm labor with a passion. While other farm kids accepted that backbreaking work was just part of life, Harry looked at every task and thought, there has to be a better way. As a teenager, Harry became obsessed with engines and mechanics. He got into motorcycles and cars, and by his early 20s, he was actually a racing driver and aviation pioneer. In 1909, he became the first person to fly an airplane in Ireland. This guy was a legitimate daredevil and inventor, but Harry never forgot about farming. He watched his family struggle with the same brutal labor he'd grown up doing, and he became convinced that the future was in mechanized agriculture. Here's the thing about early tractors. They were terrible. I mean really bad. They were basically just engines on wheels that pulled plows behind them. They were heavy, inefficient, and dangerous. Tractors would flip over backward, killing their operators. They'd get stuck in mud. They wasted enormous amounts of power. Henry Ferguson looked at these early tractors and had a revolutionary idea. What if the plow and the tractor were designed to work together as a single system? What if you could use hydraulics to control the plow, making it part of the tractor rather than just something dragged behind it? This idea became the Ferguson system, and it was genuinely revolutionary. Ferguson designed a three-point hitch system that attached implements directly to the tractor using hydraulics. This meant the weight of the implement pushed down on the tractor, giving it more traction. It meant you could raise and lower implements with a lever. It meant tractors could be smaller, lighter, and safer. But here's where Henry Ferguson's story gets really interesting. He wasn't just an inventor. He was also a master salesman and deal maker. In 1938, he did something incredible. He convinced Henry Ford to produce his tractor. The handshake agreement between Henry Ferguson and Henry Ford is legendary in business history. No written contract, just a handshake deal to produce the Ford-Ferguson tractor. And for a while, it worked brilliantly. The Ford Ferguson 9N became one of the most popular tractors in America. But then Henry Ford died, and his grandson Henry Ford II took over. The relationship soured. In 1947, Ford Motor Company abruptly ended the agreement and essentially copied Ferguson's designs for their own tractors. Ferguson was furious. He sued Ford for patent infringement in what became the biggest patent case in American history at the time. The case dragged on for 4 years and cost millions. Eventually, Ferguson won a settlement, but the damage was done. He no longer had a manufacturing partner, and he was burning through cash on legal fees. Henry Ferguson started his own company, Henry Ferguson Limited, and began manufacturing tractors in England. His tractors were excellent, arguably the best in the world, but Ferguson's company was small and undercapitalized. He was an inventor and innovator, not a businessman. He needed help. So by 1952, we have two companies in trouble. Massey Harris was a big company with a great distribution network, but outdated technology and declining sales. Henry Ferguson Limited was a small company with revolutionary technology but limited manufacturing capacity and distribution. Someone smart realized these two companies would be perfect together. The negotiations were intense. The Massey Harris board was traditional and conservative. They'd been in business for over a century and had their own way of doing things. Henry Ferguson was eccentric, stubborn, and fiercely protective of his designs and his legacy. But both sides needed each other. Massey Harris needed Ferguson's technology to compete. Ferguson needed Massey Harris's manufacturing capacity and distribution network to scale. On August 17, 1953, the merger was announced. Massey Harris and Henry Ferguson Limited would combine to form Massey Harris Ferguson Limited. Later, this would be simplified to just Massey Ferguson. The merger was valued at about $16 million, which would be over $180 million today. Henry Ferguson personally owned a significant stake in the combined company and joined the board. Now, you might think this would be a happy ending, right? Two great companies coming together, combining their strengths, ready to dominate the market. But mergers are never easy. And this one was particularly challenging. The two companies had completely different corporate cultures. Massey Harris was formal and hierarchical. Ferguson's company was innovative and fast-moving. They built tractors differently. They approached customers differently. They even painted their tractors different colors. Massey Harris used red, Ferguson used gray. Henry Ferguson himself was a difficult personality. He was brilliant but temperamental. He clashed constantly with the Massey Harris executives. He wanted everything done his way, and he couldn't understand why the company didn't immediately adopt all his ideas. Within a couple of years, Henry Ferguson became so frustrated that he sold his shares and left the company. He died in 1960, never fully reconciling with the organization that bore his name. But here's the remarkable thing. Despite all the drama and personality conflicts, through the late 1950s and 1960s, Massey Ferguson became exactly what the founders had hoped for, a global agricultural powerhouse. The company kept the best of both legacies. They maintained Massey Harris's strong distribution network and manufacturing expertise. They adopted Ferguson's revolutionary three-point hitch system, which became the industry standard. Every modern tractor uses some version of Ferguson's design. Massey Ferguson went on an expansion spree. They built factories around the world, in France, Germany, Italy, Australia, South Africa, Brazil, Argentina, and beyond. They weren't just a North American or European company, they were everywhere. The company introduced legendary tractor models that farmers still talk about today. The MF-35, released in the late 1950s, became one of the best-selling tractors of all time. The MF-135, MF-165, and later the MF-200 series were workhorses on farms across the world. By the 1970s, Massey Ferguson was the third largest agricultural equipment manufacturer in the world, behind only International Harvester and John Deere. The distinctive red tractors with the Massey Ferguson name were a common sight from Iowa to India, from Canada to Kenya. The company became particularly strong in developing markets. While American manufacturers focused primarily on North America and Europe, Massey Ferguson invested heavily in Africa, South America, and Asia. They adapted their tractors for local conditions and built relationships with farmers who were just beginning to mechanize. But the success created its own problems. Massey Ferguson had expanded so aggressively that they were overextended. They had factories everywhere, complex supply chains, and huge overhead costs. When the agricultural crisis of the 1980s hit, caused by high interest rates, falling land values, and a global recession, Massey Ferguson was devastated. Farmers couldn't afford to buy new equipment. The company had massive debt from all their expansion. In 1980, Massey Ferguson had to be bailed out by the Canadian government. They underwent massive restructuring, closing factories and laying off thousands of workers. The company went through bankruptcy proceedings and had to sell off assets. It was a dark time, and for a while it looked like Massey Ferguson might disappear entirely. But Massey Ferguson survived. The brand was too strong, and the tractors were too good. In 1994, the company was acquired by Edge Keo Corporation, an American agricultural equipment manufacturer. Under Edge Keo's ownership, Massey Ferguson has continued to thrive as a premium brand. Today, Massey Ferguson is still one of the most recognized names in agriculture. They produce a full line of tractors, combines, hay equipment, and other machinery. The distinctive red and silver color scheme is known to farmers worldwide. The three-point hitch system that Henry Ferguson invented in the 1930s, it's still the standard way tractors attach implements. Every major manufacturer uses it. Ferguson's genius is literally on every farm, whether people know it or not, and the legacy goes beyond just the equipment. Massey Ferguson helped mechanize agriculture globally. Their aggressive expansion into developing markets meant that farmers in Africa, Asia, and South America had access to modern equipment decades earlier than they might have otherwise. This had profound effects. Mechanized farming meant farmers could grow more food with less labor. It meant people could leave subsistence farming and pursue other opportunities. It contributed to the massive increases in agricultural productivity that fed the world's growing population through the 20th century. Was Massey Ferguson perfect? No. Like any large company, they made mistakes. They polluted, they had labor disputes, and they went through rough patches. But their impact on global agriculture is undeniable. Alright, that's it for today's video. What do you think? Did you know the Massey Ferguson story before this? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into agricultural history, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We've got more incredible origin stories coming your way. And if you want to suggest a company or brand for us to cover next, drop it in the comments. I read every single one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.